Adero Barden stood in front of the mirror in the staff lounge of the Obsidian Room restaurant, inspecting her reflection in the server uniform. A tight black skirt, a short-sleeved white shirt, and a small apron bearing the establishment's logo. Everything fit her perfectly. At 32, she was still youthful and attractive, though 10 years of marriage and endless attempts to conceive had left barely perceptible traces of weariness around the corners of her dark eyes. She nervously adjusted the synthetic blonde wig she was wearing. She noted the striking, thick-rimmed glasses she didn't wear in real life. The heavy, smoky eye makeup meant her own mother wouldn't recognize her, and in the cafe's dim atmosphere, her husband certainly wouldn't. Adero checked the contents of her small purse one last time. Inside, in a white envelope, were the test results that were supposed to change their lives forever. After 10 years of failed attempts, countless doctor visits, and repeated IVF procedures, the miracle had finally happened. She was pregnant. Adero closed her eyes and mentally reviewed the plan. Kwame thought she was home preparing dinner. He had no idea his wife had arranged with the restaurant manager to work as a server at the corporate party for his advertising agency, Apex Campaigns. She wanted to surprise him in a truly special way, to deliver the lab results directly on a tray among the champagne flutes. When he saw her, disguised as a stranger, he would be completely overwhelmed by the surprise. Kwame Barden had always been a man of grand gestures and intense emotions. 10 years ago, when he proposed, he rented out an entire New York brownstone event space and covered the floor in rose petals. Adero remembered him telling her, "You deserve only the best, my love." Now she wanted to give him a similar moment, one he would remember for the rest of his life. Their journey to parenthood had been long and painful. For the first 2 years, they didn't use protection, naively believing it would happen naturally. When a pregnancy didn't materialize, they began seeing doctors, first a gynecologist, then a fertility specialist. There were tests, exams, and diagnoses that felt like life sentences. Their last IVF procedure 3 months ago also seemed to have failed, but now the results showed what they had long since stopped daring to hope for. The doctors had explained that pregnancy can sometimes occur late, even after a procedure that initially appeared unsuccessful. Adero remembered sitting in the car in the clinic's parking lot after another failed attempt, Kwame holding her hand and repeating, "We'll make it, honey. We absolutely will." Back then, she believed those words unconditionally. In recent years, their relationship had weathered serious storms. The stress of being unable to conceive affected them both. Kwame spent more and more time at work. He often stayed late, citing major projects. Adero understood. It was how he dealt with disappointment. Work was his escape from their problems. Apex Campaigns, which Kwame had founded 7 years ago, had become his other child. He started from nothing, renting a tiny office and essentially working alone. Gradually, things improved. Major clients and solid contracts started rolling in. 2 years ago, he moved into a spacious office in a downtown Chicago high-rise business center and hired staff. Adero was proud of her husband's success, even if she sometimes felt lonely. Kwame might call at 8 o'clock at night and say he'd be delayed until 11 for an urgent pitch. She ate dinner alone, went to sleep alone, and by morning, he was already rushing out the door. But today, everything would change. Today, she would tell him their dream had finally come true. Adero checked the clock, 6:30. The corporate party was due to start in 30 minutes. She picked up a serving tray and headed toward the main room. The Obsidian Room was one of the most prestigious venues in the city, and Kwame had chosen it for the corporate party for a reason. It often hosted events for major Black-owned firms. The decor was classic, the lighting soft, and there was live music. Everything contributed to an atmosphere of luxury and success. Adero knew there would be about 30 people at the party, the entire agency staff, plus several key business partners. She had studied the guest list to avoid accidentally running into someone who might recognize her. Fortunately, most of the staff only knew her from photos in Kwame's office. The restaurant manager, Malcolm Tate, was an old family friend. When Adaro called him and explained the situation, he enthusiastically agreed to help. "That's romantic," he'd said. "Your husband will be thrilled." Now, standing in a corner of the ballroom, watching the servers place the last flutes on the tables, Adaro felt butterflies in her stomach, not from the pregnancy, as it was still too early for that, but from nerves. In a few minutes, Kwame would be here, and she would witness his reaction to the most important news of their lives. She pictured herself approaching his table, setting a glass of champagne in front of him, and placing the white envelope next to it. She imagined him opening it, reading the test results, his face shifting from surprise to understanding, and then to boundless joy. How he would leap up, embrace her, perhaps even cry tears of happiness. The sound of the door opening interrupted her fantasies. The first guests began to arrive. Adaro retreated to the shadows, watching them enter. She recognized several agency employees from photos Kwame sometimes showed her on his phone. There was Che Walker, the creative director, a tall man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair. Beside him walked Shakira Brooks, the head of the marketing department, an elegant woman in a tailored suit. The guests settled at tables, chatting animatedly. Servers began circulating with appetizers and filling glasses. Adaro checked her disguise one last time and took a tray of champagne. A few minutes later, Kwame appeared. Adaro felt her heart pound. He looked impeccable, as always. A dark suit, a crisp white shirt, a tie that matched his jacket, his hair neatly styled, his face fresh from a clean shave. At 35, he was still the charming man she had fallen for 12 years ago, but something about his behavior struck her as odd. Usually, at events like this, Kwame was confident, the center of attention. Tonight, he seemed preoccupied, as if his thoughts were elsewhere. Kwame greeted the guests, but Adaro noticed he kept glancing toward the entrance. He was waiting for someone. She frowned. According to her information, all the invited guests were already present. The answer arrived a few minutes later. The door opened and a young woman walked in. Adaro didn't know her, but the way Kwame's face lit up and he moved toward the entrance made it clear this was the person he was expecting. The woman was very young, maybe 23 or 24, with long, honey blonde hair, a perfect figure, and beautiful, sharp features. She wore a sleek red dress that emphasized her youth and appeal. Kwame approached her, and Adaro watched as he took her hand and whispered something that made the young woman laugh. In his eyes was a spark Adaro hadn't seen in a long time, a spark that used to be reserved just for her. A chill ran down her spine. Who was this woman? Why in the world was he looking at her the way he used to look only at his wife? Adaro moved closer, pretending to clear empty glasses from a nearby table. Now she could hear their conversation. "Nyala, I'm glad you could make it," Kwame said, his voice laced with a tenderness Adaro hadn't heard in ages. "Of course, Kwame," the young woman replied. "You know I couldn't miss such an important event." Adaro felt something clench in her chest at the way she pronounced his name. Kwame. Only the closest people called him that. Before, only she did. Kwame escorted the young woman to the table and seated her next to him. Adaro noted how carefully he chose the spot for her, how he helped her remove her light shawl. These small gestures spoke volumes. Adaro's heart hammered, but she forced herself to remain calm. Perhaps she was just a colleague, a new employee Kwame wanted to introduce to the team, though the voice of reason suggested colleagues weren't greeted with that look on one's face. She continued her duties as a server, but now all her attention was focused on her husband's table. The young woman, Nyala, seemed completely at ease in the company of the agency staff. She laughed at their jokes and participated in the conversation as if she had been part of the team forever. Che Walker was recounting something, gesticulating wildly, and everyone at the table was roaring with laughter. Adaro watched as Kwame and Nyala exchanged glances, how he lightly touched her hand when passing her a napkin. These touches were brief, almost imperceptible, but to Adaro they were louder than any words. Time dragged on, and the corporate party picked up steam. Adaro mechanically performed her job, but her thoughts were in chaos. She still hoped she was wrong, that this closeness had an innocent explanation, that she had simply been living under too much tension and was now seeing threats where there were none. But with every passing minute, it became more obvious that her worst fears were founded. An hour went by. Adaro continued to observe her husband's table, feeling anxiety and suspicion grow inside her. Kwame and Nyala were acting increasingly familiar. He would lean toward her, whispering something in her ear. She would laugh, touching his arm. Their interaction was too intimate for simple colleagues. Adaro remembered Kwame telling her about the new executive assistant he had hired 2 months ago. Young, ambitious, very capable, he'd said then. From a good family, excellent education. Now it was all clear. This was the executive assistant. Kwame had been planning the divorce even back then. Adaro shook her head, trying to ward off the terrible thoughts. She couldn't jump to conclusions. Maybe they were just getting along well as colleagues. Maybe she was exaggerating the closeness of their relationship due to her own worries and fluctuating hormones. She decided to approach their table and serve champagne. It would be the perfect moment for the surprise. Kwame would see her, be stunned, and she would solemnly present him with the envelope containing the test results. Everything would go according to plan, and these stupid suspicions would dissipate on their own. Adaro took a tray with flutes and headed toward the table. Her heart pounded so hard she feared others might hear it. The envelope with the test results, the most important news of their lives, was tucked into her apron pocket. But as she drew closer, she overheard a conversation that made her freeze. "Kwame, when are you going to file the divorce papers?" Nyala asked, her voice holding not a hint of compassion, but rather impatience. "Soon, sweetheart. I just need to pick the right moment," Kwame replied, and Adaro felt the earth sink beneath her feet. Sweetheart. He called her sweetheart. "But my parents' deal has to be finalized by the end of next month," Nyala continued. "They insist that you be free of marital obligations." "I know. The papers are already drawn up. I just need to serve my wife. Everything will be done in time. Trust me." Parents' deal, divorce. Adaro stood rooted to the spot, holding the tray with trembling hands. She knew she should leave, but she couldn't move. "I'm just worried," Nyala said, and Adaro watched as she placed her hand on the back of Kwame's neck. "My parents know about your marriage, and they're against any relationships with married men. It goes against our family principles." Kwame covered her hand with his. "I understand. Your parents are right. First, you have to close the past, then you can build the future. But divorce is complicated, especially after 10 years of marriage." At that moment, Che Walker approached their table with a champagne glass in hand. He was slightly tipsy and speaking louder than usual. "My friends," he proclaimed, raising his glass, "let's toast to our boss and his stunning date." Everyone at the table raised their glasses, and Che continued, "Kwame, Nyala, you two are such a beautiful couple. Honestly, like something out of a magazine. When's the wedding? We're all invited, right?" Adaro felt the world begin to spin. Wedding. They were talking about a wedding. She lifted her eyes to her husband and saw him smile sheepishly while Nyala playfully looped her arm around his neck. That gesture was so intimate, so natural, that it left no room for doubt. "Che, you've had too much to drink," Kwame said, laughing, but he didn't pull away from the young woman's touch. "Come on, the whole office talks about you two, a gorgeous couple trying to keep it a secret." Adaro was 6 feet away from them, and no one noticed her. The tray in her hands shook harder and harder. The envelope with the test results in her pocket felt like white-hot iron. The whole office talks about them. That meant it wasn't a secret. It meant everyone knew about her husband's affair with the young executive assistant. Everyone but her. 10 years of trying to have a baby, of hopes and disappointments, of faith that their love would conquer any challenge. And all this time, especially in the last few months, when she thought Kwame was just exhausted from their failures, he was meeting another woman, young, beautiful, and probably without reproductive issues. Someone with whom he could have the future he never achieved in their marriage. Adaro turned and quickly walked toward the exit of the ballroom. She needed to be alone, to process what she had discovered. She placed the tray on the first table she found, ignoring the surprised looks of the other servers. In the service hallway, she leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Her hands trembled, but there were no tears, only emptiness and a strange sense of unreality about what was happening. She pulled the envelope from her pocket and looked at it. Inside were the test results that should have been the start of a new chapter in their lives. Now they were a cruel twist of fate. Pregnant. Finally pregnant after 10 years of waiting. And she discovered it on the same day she uncovered her husband's infidelity. Adaro folded the envelope in half and put it back in her purse. Kwame would not find out about the pregnancy. Not today. Maybe never. First, she needed to understand what was happening, who this Nyala was, and what this parents' deal was all about. From the sound of it, there was something bigger than a simple office romance at play. Adaro straightened up and took a deep breath. She would go back into the ballroom and continue playing the role of a server. She would listen, observe, and gather information. If her marriage was being destroyed, she wanted to know the full truth. Adaro returned to the ballroom, picked up a fresh tray, and continued working. Now, she wasn't just observing. She was listening intently to every word, every hint, every casual phrase that might shed light on the relationship between her husband and his young lover. The corporate party was in full swing. The guests had relaxed, and conversations had become more frank. Adaro knew this worked in her favor. People guard their words less carefully when they think no one is listening. She approached a table where several female employees of the agency were sitting. Shakira Brooks, the head of marketing, was talking with Keisha Green, a designer. "Honestly, I feel bad for her," Shakira said, shaking her head. "For who?" Keisha asked. "Kwame's wife, of course. She has no idea what's going on." Adaro slowed her pace, pretending to wipe glasses. "And it's that obvious?" Keisha lowered her voice. "What is? Is she blind? Kwame has completely lost his mind. That Sterling woman has him totally wrapped around her finger. He only thinks about her now." Sterling? So, Nyala Sterling. Now she had a first and last name. But he has a wife. They've been together for so long. 10 years, Shakira confirmed. And all this time trying to have a baby. They say they have fertility issues. And here comes a young, beautiful girl from a wealthy family. Do you think he can resist? From a wealthy family. Yes, her father is Amadi Sterling, remember? The one who owns the Gold Coast Mall's commercial real estate chain. A real deal millionaire. And her mother, Zuri Sterling, runs that high-end Atlanta-based modeling agency. They have connections, money, influence. Kwame always dreamed of breaking into that circle. Adaro felt everything turn cold inside. So it wasn't just about Nyala's youth and beauty. It was about her family's money and connections. And so what? He's going to divorce her for that? I think so. Though nothing has been officially announced yet, judging by how he's behaving. Plus, I heard the Sterlings are very serious about reputation. They'd never associate with someone who has skeletons in their closet. Keisha sighed. Poor wife. She doesn't know a thing. Life is cruel, Shakira commented philosophically, especially for women our age. Men, as soon as they achieve success, immediately start looking for something new. Adaro moved away from their table. She had heard enough. The picture was starting to clear up, but she wanted to know more. She needed to understand how serious Kwame's intentions were and what that parents' deal he and Nyala had talked about truly entailed. She approached the table where men from the agency's accounting department were sitting. They were discussing work matters, but their eyes occasionally drifted to the table where Kwame and Nyala sat. "Did you hear Kwame is planning to expand the business?" asked one of them, Omari Jones. "Yeah, they say he wants to open an office in Atlanta, but that requires serious investment," replied his colleague. "Exactly. And where's he going to get that kind of money? The agency is doing well, but not that well to afford an Atlanta expansion. That's why he's dating Sterling's daughter. Her dad can finance anything, especially if they become family. I heard the old man has plans to create a media empire. Advertising, television, internet projects. He needs a reliable partner in the ad business for that. Adero clenched her fists. Her suspicions were confirmed. Kwame wasn't just cheating. He was using the young woman to achieve his business goals. You think he'll marry her? Of course. The Sterlings aren't the type to finance romances with married men. If you want to marry into that family, you have to be free first. They're very scrupulous about morals. And the wife? What about the wife? He'll divorce her. That's it. Kwame's already consulted with lawyers. They say in a mutual agreement divorce, everything is settled quickly. Besides, they don't have kids. No co-parenting drama. They don't have kids. If only they knew that in her purse, she held the test results confirming her pregnancy. A wave of anger rose within Adero. Kwame wasn't just cheating. He was coldly planning to destroy their marriage for money and career advancement. All those years of struggling for a child, all the tears, all the hopes. To him, it was just an inconvenience that was getting in the way of his ambition. She checked the clock. 8:30. The corporate party wasn't quite over, but many guests were already starting to leave. Soon, Kwame and Nyala would also be leaving the restaurant, likely together. Adero went to the restroom mirror and looked at her reflection. She looked calm, but a storm raged inside. She needed to make a decision. Go home, pretend she knew nothing, and wait for Kwame to tell her about his plans himself, or act. She took out her phone and started searching online for information about the Sterling family. If she was going to fight for her life, she had to know the enemy. Amadi Sterling, 58, owner of the Gold Coast Mall's commercial real estate chain, which included a dozen major shopping centers across different cities. His wealth was estimated in the hundreds of millions of dollars. His wife, Zuri Sterling, 54, was a well-known figure in the modeling world. Her elite agency worked with international brands. Nyala Sterling, 24, only child, a graduate of Howard University's School of Business, a rich, influential family with connections in business, politics, and entertainment. For a person with Kwame's ambition, this was the ideal path to reach a new level. Adero continued her search and found an article in a business magazine dated last month. Amadi Sterling plans business expansion into the advertising and marketing sector. The article stated that the millionaire was looking for a reliable partner to create a major advertising holding company. It all fit. Kwame didn't meet Nyala by chance. He intentionally sought her attention to use her as a conduit to her father and his money. Adero put away her phone and left the restroom. The ballroom had quieted noticeably. Some guests had already left. She saw that Kwame and Nyala were also preparing to go. He was helping her put on her shawl. Their heads were close together, and they spoke in low voices about something. "Let's go to my place," Adero heard Nyala's voice. "Not tonight, sweetheart. My wife will be waiting. I don't want to raise any suspicion before the time is right." "I understand. Tomorrow, then. We need to discuss the meeting with my parents." They headed toward the exit. Kwame said goodbye to his colleagues. Nyala smiled sweetly at everyone. The perfect couple, just as Che Walker had called them. Adero waited a few minutes and then left the restaurant herself. Malcolm Tate accompanied her to the exit. "So, how did your surprise go?" he asked with a kind smile. "Better than I expected," Adero replied. And it was true. She had discovered more about her husband than she had planned. Back home, Adero removed the wig, took off the server uniform, and showered. The hot water couldn't wash away the heaviness in her soul, but it helped organize her thoughts. She changed into comfortable clothes and sat in the kitchen. Kwame would be back soon. She needed to decide how to act. Pretend nothing happened? 'Cause a scene? Demand explanations? Not yet. She knew his intentions, but he suspected nothing. That gave her an advantage. She needed to use it wisely. Adero pulled the envelope with the test results from her purse and reread them once more. Pregnant, 4 weeks. The miracle they had waited 10 years for had occurred just as her marriage was crumbling. What cruel irony. Kwame was planning to leave her, unaware that the dream of his life had finally come true. Although, if he found out, the situation might change drastically. Or would it? Was money and career more important to him than a child? Adaro folded the results and placed them in the back of her desk drawer. For now, she wouldn't tell anyone about the pregnancy. She needed time to think through the situation and make the right decision. Around 10:30, the front door opened. Kwame was home. "Hey, honey," he said, walking into the kitchen. He looked slightly tired but satisfied. "How are you? What did you do tonight?" "I read, watched some TV," Adaro replied calmly. "How was the corporate party?" "Good. The team's happy. The partners are too. I think we have some interesting new projects coming up in the near future." He spoke in his normal tone, but Adaro noticed he avoided eye contact, and he smelled of an unfamiliar feminine perfume. "That's good," she said. "Want anything?" "No thanks. I'm tired. I'm going to bed." Kwame kissed her on the cheek, the usual mechanical kiss, and headed to the bedroom. Adaro remained seated in the kitchen. How easily he lied. How naturally he played the role of the loving husband returning from a corporate party. And yet, barely an hour ago, he was embracing another woman, making plans with her for a future where there was no place for his wife. Adaro listened to the sounds from the bedroom. Kwame was showering, probably washing off the scent of the other woman's perfume. How calculated. How careful. Half an hour later, she went to bed too. Kwame was already lying down, his back to the wall. Before, when he came home late, he always held her. He told her about his day. Now he pretended to be asleep. Adaro lay beside him without touching him. In the darkness, she stared at the ceiling and thought about how their life had changed. When did this begin? When Kwame realized he wanted another woman? When he decided that his career was more important than love? Or perhaps the love had been gone for a long time, and she simply hadn't wanted to notice, clinging to illusions. In the last few months, Kwame had become colder, more distant. She had attributed it to the stress of the failed IVF attempts, to being worn out by work. Now she understood. He was simply preparing for a new life, without her. A steady breathing sound came from beside her. Kwame was sleeping, or pretending to. Adaro closed her eyes and tried to fall asleep, but sleep wouldn't come. Thoughts, plans, and fragments of the conversations she'd overheard swirled in her head. She had to do something. She couldn't just sit and wait for her husband to announce the divorce. She had rights. She had dignity. And now she had a child to protect. But she had to act intelligently and carefully. She couldn't afford to make any mistakes. The next day, Kwame left for work earlier than usual. "Big meeting," he explained, quickly finishing his coffee. Adaro saw him off at the door, as always, but now these habitual rituals felt like a charade. Left alone, she sat down at the computer and began a methodical study of everything related to the Sterling family and her husband's activities. If she wanted to understand Kwame's true motives and find a way to protect herself, she needed to know all the details. She started by looking at public information about Amadi Sterling, a successful businessman, owner of the Gold Coast Malls chain, which included 12 large commercial centers in different cities across the state. His net worth was estimated in the hundreds of millions of dollars. His wife, Zuri, was a well-known figure in the modeling world. Her elite agency worked with international brands. But Adaro found the most interesting information in the business press. Amadi Sterling was planning to diversify his business. He wanted to enter the media sector, create his own advertising empire that could serve not only his malls, but also external clients. For this, he needed an experienced partner in the advertising business, someone who understood the industry from the inside, who had a reputation and connections, someone like Kwame Barden. Now it all became clear. Kwame hadn't just fallen for a young beauty. He had seen an opportunity to radically change his life, to enter the circle of millionaires, to become part of the business elite. Nyala was not the goal, but the means to that end. Adaro switched to studying Apex Campaign's financial documents. Kwame had never hidden business information from her, figuring she didn't understand such things. But Adaro had an economics degree and knew how to read between the lines. The agency was successful, but it clearly didn't have enough money for a serious expansion. Kwame had taken out loans, but they weren't enough for his ambitious plans. A partnership with the Sterlings would solve all his financial problems at once. Reviewing the documents, Adero came across several strange transactions, small sums passing through the agency, but not reflected in the main accounting ledger. She saved copies of these documents. Maybe they would be useful later. By noon, Adero had a complete picture of the situation. Kwame planned to divorce her, marry Nyala Sterling, and partner with her father to create a media empire. But for that, he needed to make a good impression on the Sterling family. And what if that didn't happen? What if the Sterlings found out something unpleasant about Kwame and backed out of the collaboration? Adero understood that she had an opportunity to influence the situation, but she had to act smartly and carefully. Adero decided to meet the Sterling family personally, not as Kwame's wife, but as an independent person. This would allow her to assess their character and figure out the best way to proceed. The elite modeling agency was located in a prestigious business center in the heart of the city. Adero changed into an elegant business suit, applied professional makeup, and headed out for reconnaissance. An entrepreneurial atmosphere reigned in the agency. Beautiful models walked the hallways, managers discussed contracts, and photographers set up equipment. Adero approached the receptionist. "Good morning, my name is Elena Ramirez. I represent a cosmetics production company. I'd like to meet with management to discuss a potential collaboration." The receptionist, accustomed to such requests, smiled politely. "I'm sorry, Zuri is at a photo shoot today, but I can schedule an appointment for tomorrow." "Wouldn't it be possible to meet today? The matter is quite urgent, and I'm prepared to wait." After brief negotiations, Adero was allowed to wait in the agency's lobby. She sat in a comfortable armchair and began observing her surroundings. An hour later, an elegant woman in her 50s entered the agency, Zuri Sterling. Adero recognized her from photos online. At her age, she looked magnificent, a slender figure, well-maintained appearance, and expensive clothes. "Zuri, a representative from a cosmetics company, is waiting for you," the receptionist informed her. Zuri looked Adero up and down with assessing eyes. "Come into my office." The agency director's office was tastefully decorated. Modern furniture, artwork on the walls, and large windows with a view of the city. Zuri sat down at her desk and invited Adero to take a seat opposite her. "All right, what cosmetics company are you interested in?" Adero was prepared for the question. "We are launching a new line of anti-aging cosmetics for women over 30. We need models of the corresponding age for the advertising campaign." "I see. And what is your budget?" Adero named a significant sum, which piqued Zuri's interest. For the next 30 minutes, they discussed the details of the potential collaboration. During the conversation, Adero carefully studied Zuri Sterling's character. An intelligent, shrewd woman, accustomed to luxury, but most importantly, deeply concerned with the reputation of her agency and family. "We have very high standards," Zuri emphasized. "We only work with vetted companies that value their reputation as much as we do." "Of course, we understand," Adero agreed. "By the way, how do you feel about collaborating with ad agencies? We have experience working with Apex campaigns." Zuri tensed for a moment. "Apex campaigns? Oh yes, I've heard of them. Their director is dating my daughter." "Seriously? And how do you feel about that?" "We're evaluating things for now," Zuri replied cautiously. "We always carefully vet the people who want to enter our circle." Adero understood that the Sterling family knew about Kwame's marriage, but demanded he divorce as a condition for a serious relationship. This explained why Kwame was in such a hurry. "I see. Reputation is the foundation of successful business," Adero agreed. The meeting ended with an exchange of contacts and an agreement for a second meeting. Zuri accompanied Adero to the elevator. "By the way," Adero said before saying goodbye, "if you have doubts about Apex campaigns, perhaps you should take a closer look at their client portfolio. Not all of their projects are equally presentable." Zuri looked at her intently. "What do you mean?" "Nothing specific," Adero shrugged. "Just that in our business, it's important to know who your partners are working with, especially if it's a married man rushing to divorce for new opportunities." "Goodbye." Adero stepped into the elevator, leaving Zuri thoughtful. The seed of doubt had been planted. Now, she just had to wait for it to sprout. That same evening, Kwame returned home in a good mood. During dinner, he talked about future plans, about new projects that could take the agency to a qualitatively new level. "You know, Adero, I think our life is going to change dramatically in the near future," he said, unaware of how prophetic his words would be. "In what way?" Adero asked, continuing to play the role of the unsuspecting wife. "The possibility of a serious partnership has come up. If everything goes well, we will become one of the largest ad agencies in the country." "Sounds interesting. What kind of partners?" Kwame hesitated for a moment. "I don't want to go into detail right now. Negotiations are just beginning." Adero nodded, though she knew he was lying. The negotiations were far from the beginning. Kwame had been dating the potential partner's daughter for several months already. After dinner, Kwame secluded himself in his home office, supposedly working on an important project. Adero could hear him talking on the phone in a low voice, probably with Nyala. The next day, Adero continued her investigation. She decided to find out how seriously the Sterling family took vetting potential partners. Through contacts in the banking sector, she learned that Amadi Sterling was indeed planning major investments in the media business, but he was also known for his caution and meticulousness in choosing partners. Every potential associate was vetted not only financially, but also in terms of reputation. The Sterlings could not afford to associate with questionable individuals. It would damage their own business. This confirmed the correctness of Adero's strategy. If she could show the Sterlings the unpleasant aspects of Kwame's activities, they would reject the partnership, and thus the motivation for him to marry their daughter would disappear. But for that, she needed solid proof. Mere suspicion was not enough. Adero remembered the strange financial transactions she had discovered in the agency's documents. Perhaps it was worth looking at them more closely. She spent several days analyzing Apex Campaign's financial flows. Gradually, a picture emerged that could seriously compromise Kwame. The agency worked with several clients whose reputations were far from ideal. A construction company involved in a corruption scandal, a chain of entertainment venues with a dubious reputation, and a financial company accused of fraud. Kwame not only took jobs from them, but he helped them launder their reputation and create a positive image, receiving substantial fees for this, part of which was kept off the tax records. This was what she needed. The Sterling family would never associate with a person who collaborated with shady figures. A week after her meeting with Zuri Sterling, Adero decided to deliver the next blow. She prepared carefully for the meeting, gathering all the compromising materials regarding her husband's activities. This time, she decided to go directly to Amadi Sterling as a potential investor in his media projects. Amadi Sterling's office was located on the top floor of one of the commercial centers he owned. Adero went to the reception desk. "Mr. Sterling only receives by appointment," the executive assistant informed her. "I understand, but I have information that might interest him. It concerns his plans in the media sector." After a brief negotiation, Adero was ushered into the office of the head of the Sterling empire. Amadi Sterling was a man of imposing build, with graying hair and a penetrating gaze. His office was impressive in its size and luxury, with antique furniture, a collection of artwork on the walls, and large windows overlooking the city. "So, what information do you have?" he asked, not wasting time on pleasantries. "Information about your potential partner in the media business, about Kwame Barden and his agency, Apex Campaigns." Amadi Sterling became alert. "How do you know about our negotiations?" "Many things are known in business circles, especially when dealing with such large investments." Adero pulled out a folder of documents. "Mr. Sterling, before you tie your reputation to Apex Campaigns, you should know what kind of clients they work with." She spread photocopies of contracts, bank statements, and correspondence with dubious clients across the table. Here's the contract with Alliance Construction, which is involved in a corruption scandal. And here's the work with the Golden Chip casino chain, which is accused of money laundering. Amadi carefully studied the documents. His face grew increasingly grim. And you claim that Barden knew about these companies' issues? He didn't just know. He actively helped them clean up their reputation after scandals. He received additional fees for this that were not reflected in the official accounting records. Adero showed several more documents. And this is correspondence with the management of the Capota's financial pyramid. Apex Campaigns developed an advertising campaign for them even after the first accusations of fraud appeared in the press. Amadi set the documents down and looked at Adero. Where did you get this information, and what do you want in return? I want you to know the truth about the person you plan to make your partner, and obtaining this information was not difficult. I have contacts in the right circles. And what do you propose? Nothing. I'm just sharing information. The decision is yours. Amadi pondered. And why are you doing this? What's your angle? Adero was prepared for the question. Understand, Mr. Sterling, in business, sometimes you have to choose partners, and it's better to know the whole truth beforehand than to get unpleasant surprises later. It was the truth, though not the whole truth. Amadi apparently understood this, but the documents spoke for themselves. I will study this information, he finally said. If it's confirmed, then thank you for the warning. Adero stood up. You're welcome. Good luck with your business. Leaving the office, she felt satisfaction. The first move had been made. Now, all that remained was to wait for the Sterling family's reaction. Amadi Sterling was not a person who made decisions based on rumors or unverified information. After the meeting with the mysterious Elena Ramirez, he tasked his people with thoroughly verifying everything related to Apex Campaigns and Kwame Barden personally. The check took 2 weeks. Private detectives and auditors working for Sterling confirmed most of the information Adero had provided. Apex Campaigns really did collaborate with dubious clients. Part of the revenue was kept off the tax records, and they had ties to individuals with criminal reputations. On the night Amadi received the final report, he convened a family meeting. Present at dinner in the Sterling mansion were Amadi himself, his wife Zuri, and their daughter Nyala. Nyala, we need to talk about your boyfriend, Amadi began, putting down his fork. Nyala grew alert. Is something wrong, Dad? You could say that. We conducted a verification of his agency's activities. The results are disheartening. Amadi told his daughter what his employees had discovered. The dubious clients, the hidden income, the links to criminal operations. That can't be right, Nyala said, turning pale. Kwame is an honest person. He would never— Sweetheart, the facts speak for themselves, Zuri gently interjected. Your Kwame is not who he pretends to be. Amadi pulled out a folder of documents. See for yourself. Here are the contracts. Here are the bank statements. Everything verified by our people. Nyala skimmed the documents, her face growing paler. But can't it be explained? Maybe he didn't know about the client's problems. Nyala, you're a smart girl. Do you really believe an experienced advertiser doesn't know his clients' reputations? Nyala fell silent, digesting what she had heard. All her illusions about Kwame were shattering before her eyes. And that's not all, Amadi continued. Our people discovered that Mr. Barden took an interest in our family long before he met you. He intentionally looked for a way to get into our circle. So he used me, Nyala whispered. I'm afraid so. You, us, our connections, and our money. Zuri embraced her daughter's shoulders. Honey, I know how much this hurts, but it's better to know the truth now than years from now, Nyala cried. I loved him so much. I thought we were building a real relationship. You're still young. You have your whole life ahead of you, her father consoled her. And now you know that not all men can be trusted. What should I do? How do I talk to him? Amadi thought for a moment. For now, do nothing. Act as you always do. I need time to decide how to proceed with this scoundrel. And what about the partnership? There will be no partnership, of course, but Barden doesn't know that yet, and he shouldn't. The next day, Amadi Sterling met with his chief security advisor, Kofi Osei, a former FBI field agent and now head of the Sterling Empire Security Service. Kofi knew how to resolve the most sensitive issues. "Kofi, we have a problem," Amadi began, recounting the situation with Kwame Barden. Kofi listened intently and studied the provided documents. "Serious material. This is enough to start a criminal case." "That's exactly what I want to discuss. What are our options?" "Three main directions. First, turn everything over to the authorities. Barden will get serious jail time. Second, economic pressure. Use our connections with banks to block his credit lines. Use our clients to terminate contracts. Ruin his business without criminal prosecution. And the third, a combined approach. First, economic pressure. Then, when he's weakened, the criminal case. That way, he won't be able to mount a serious defense." Amadi reflected. "Kofi, what about his wife? Is she aware of these maneuvers?" "Unlikely. According to our data, she's a simple housewife. She's been focused only on trying to get pregnant for the last few years. Most likely she knows nothing about her husband's shady dealings." "I see. Then I'm leaning toward the third option, but we need to proceed carefully. I don't want our family getting dragged into a scandal." "Of course. We'll start with economic pressure. I have contacts at the IRS and the banking sector. In a month or two, Barden will feel the ground sinking beneath his feet. And what about Nyala? Let her continue seeing him for now. Let her play her role. The longer Barden doesn't suspect that we know the truth, the better for us." Amadi nodded. "Good. Proceed." But the Sterlings' plans didn't materialize as quickly as they wished. Kofi needed time to activate all the necessary connections and put the pressure mechanisms into motion. Meanwhile, Kwame continued building his plans for the future, unaware that the family of his beloved already knew the full truth about him. 1 month passed since Adero learned of her husband's infidelity. During this time, she mastered the role of the unsuspecting wife. Kwame still believed he was successfully deceiving her. Their relationship became even more formal. Kwame spent increasingly more time at work, and he showed less and less interest in his wife's affairs. But Adero no longer suffered from his coldness. She knew the reason for his behavior. The pregnancy was progressing well. Adero regularly visited the doctor. She decided Kwame would only find out about the baby when hiding the pregnancy became impossible. Elias Mbeki, the fertility specialist who had treated her for years, was surprised by the changes in his patient. "Mrs. Barden, you look magnificent," he told her during one consultation. "Pregnancy clearly suits you." "Thank you, doctor. I finally feel happy." "And your husband must be on cloud 9. Adero avoided a direct answer. "We're going through a complicated time right now. Kwame is very busy with work." Elias noticed her reluctance to discuss her husband, but didn't press the issue. Years of practice had taught him to read between the lines. "If you need support, please come to me. I'm always ready to help." In his words was not just professional care, but something more. Adero noticed it and felt gratitude and affection toward the doctor. Meanwhile, Kofi's plans began to yield results. The IRS initiated an audit of Apex campaigns. Several major clients unexpectedly terminated their contracts. Banks began demanding early repayment of loans. Kwame was becoming nervous, but he still didn't understand what was happening. He attributed the problems to the general economic situation and temporary difficulties. "It's nothing serious, sweetheart," he told Nyala during one of their meetings. "As soon as we sign the deal with your father, all the problems will be solved." Nyala tried to play the role of the young woman in love, but inside, she was torn by conflicting feelings. On one hand, she knew the truth about Kwame. On the other, she couldn't immediately forget the feelings she had developed for him. "Kwame, when will the meeting with your parents happen?" she asked. "Soon, my love. Your father is a very busy man, but we will definitely find time for an important conversation." In reality, Kwame had already tried several times to arrange a meeting with Amadi Sterling, but the mogul kept finding reasons to postpone it. 6 weeks after the corporate party, Adaro received an unexpected call. An unknown male voice introduced himself as Amadi Sterling's assistant and requested a meeting. "Mr. Sterling would like to speak with you personally. It concerns mutual interests." Adaro agreed, though she was surprised. The meeting was scheduled at a small cafe in the city center. Adaro arrived exactly at the agreed time and saw Amadi Sterling. "Adaro Barden or Elena Ramirez?" he asked, rising as he saw her. "Adaro Barden. Thank you for agreeing to meet." They sat at a corner table in the cafe, away from other patrons. "Honestly, I don't understand what we could talk about," Adaro said. "About your husband and my daughter, about the fact that we both know the truth about his intentions." Adaro grew alert. "When did you find out I'm his wife?" "I've known since you introduced yourself as Elena Ramirez and provided me with information about Apex campaigns." Adaro paled. She had been discovered. "Don't worry," Amadi reassured her. "I'm not going to judge you. On the contrary, I want to thank you. Thanks to you, we learned the truth about your husband." "How did you figure me out?" "I have good analysts. They tracked all your steps. Besides, few people could have access to the agency's financial documents." Amadi ordered coffee and tea for Adaro. "I want to propose a collaboration," he said. "What kind of collaboration?" "We have both suffered because of your husband's actions. He misled my daughter. He planned to use our family. He betrayed you, destroyed your marriage. It seems to me that we have common interests." Adaro considered his words. "What are you proposing? To join forces?" "You have access to information about your husband's activities. I have the resources to utilize it. Together, we can punish him as he deserves." "Punish? In what way?" "Completely destroy his business and reputation. Deprive him of the opportunity to ever mislead women or engage in criminal activities again." Adaro hesitated. "And what do I get in return?" Amadi named a sum that made her gasp. It was serious money, enough for a comfortable life for many years. "Why do you need this?" "It's not about the money. It's about principle. No one should use my family with impunity. And besides, I don't like men who betray their wives." Adaro thought about it. The proposal was tempting, but she understood she was agreeing to participate in a serious game. "I have one condition," she finally said, "which is, I want Kwame not only to lose his business, he must face criminal responsibility for his crimes." Amadi smiled. "That can be arranged. We have enough connections in law enforcement. And one more thing, I'm pregnant with his child. I want the child to have everything they need." "Of course, we will ensure you have everything necessary to raise the child." Adaro extended her hand to shake. "It's a deal." The plan was developed in detail. Kofi Ose worked out a step-by-step strategy for destroying Kwame's business and then his arrest on charges of tax evasion and money laundering. The first stage, economic pressure on the agency, was already underway. Now began the second stage, gathering additional incriminating evidence. Adaro received special recording equipment from Kofi. Her task was to provoke Kwame into confessions about his shady dealings. "The main thing is not to overact," Kofi instructed her. "Act naturally. Ask questions indirectly, as if from normal curiosity." But provoking Kwame proved not so simple. He was cautious and rarely talked about work at home. Moreover, the problems at the agency made him increasingly nervous and suspicious. "Adaro, do you think someone is watching us?" he asked one evening. "Watching? What do you mean?" "I don't know. Too many problems have hit the agency lately, as if someone is intentionally choking us out. Maybe it's just bad luck. I don't believe in coincidences, especially when it comes to business." Kwame walked to the window and looked out at the street. "And I also feel like the apartment is being watched. I've seen the same car in the courtyard several times." Adaro felt a jolt of alarm. Did Kwame suspect something? "Kwame, you're just tired. Work stress is getting to your nerves." Possibly, but I still want you to be careful. If you notice anything strange, call me immediately. Meanwhile, the agency's problems grew like a snowball. The IRS audit uncovered multiple violations. Banks demanded early repayment of loans. Major clients massively terminated contracts. Kwame ran around trying to save the situation, but it was too late. The mechanism of his business's destruction had been set in motion and was working with ruthless efficiency. "Sweetheart, we need to speed up the meeting with your parents," he told Nyala during one of their meetups. "The situation is getting critical." "I understand, Kwame, but Dad is very busy. He says he can only meet in a couple of weeks." "A couple of weeks?" Kwame ran a nervous hand through his hair. "I'm afraid by then, there won't be an agency left." "What do you mean? The problems are more serious than I thought. I might have to declare bankruptcy." Nyala feigned shock. "But what about our plans, the partnership with Dad?" "That's exactly why I need an urgent meeting. Only your father's investment can save the situation." That same evening, Nyala relayed this conversation to her father. Amadi Sterling nodded, satisfied. "Excellent. Barden is starting to panic. It's time to move to the next stage." 3 months after the corporate party, Kwame Barden's empire definitively collapsed. Apex Campaigns was declared bankrupt. All assets were seized by court martials. Bank accounts were blocked. But the worst was yet to come. Investigators initiated a criminal case on charges of tax evasion and money laundering. Kwame was summoned for interrogation. He came home late that night, pale and distraught. "Adero, we have serious problems," he said, sinking into the armchair. "What happened?" "They're accusing me of financial crimes. I have to go back to the investigator tomorrow." Adero feigned horror. "But you're not guilty of anything." "Of course I'm not guilty, but they have some documents that supposedly prove my guilt." "What documents?" "I don't know. The investigator won't show them to me. He says everything will be clarified during the investigation." Kwame got up and began pacing the room. "I don't understand where they got this information. Someone turned us in, Adero, someone who had access to the agency's internal documents." Adero felt her heart beat faster. "Do you think it's one of the employees?" "I don't know, but I see no other explanation." That night, Kwame didn't sleep. He lay next to his wife, thinking about how his whole life was falling apart. Just 3 months ago, he was making grand plans. He dreamed of the partnership with the Sterlings, of wealth and success. Now, he was facing real jail time. And Nyala? Nyala disappeared from his life as soon as the problems started. First, she stopped answering his calls. Then she completely changed her phone number. Amadi Sterling's executive assistant politely informed him that Mr. Sterling could not meet due to his busy schedule. Kwame understood. He had been used and discarded as soon as he stopped being useful. The next morning, investigators presented Kwame with serious charges, and he was arrested. When the investigator's car disappeared around the corner, taking Kwame away, Adero felt a strange emptiness. 10 years of life with this man had come to an end, but she felt neither pity nor regret. Kwame had gotten what he deserved. She took out her phone and dialed Amadi Sterling's number. "It's over," she said. "Yes, I know. My people monitored the situation. Barden will get around 7 or 8 years in prison." "What now?" "Now begins your new life. The money has already been transferred to your account. The divorce papers are prepared by my lawyers. As soon as he signs them from jail, you will be free." Adero placed her hand on her abdomen. The pregnancy was now noticeable. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "I am the one who should thank you. Without your help, we wouldn't have been able to protect our family. And how is Nyala?" "She's having a hard time, but she's young. She'll forget everything. Plus, she's learned a valuable lesson for the future." After the conversation with Amadi, Adero began packing her things. She couldn't live in this apartment filled with memories of Kwame anymore. 2 weeks later, she moved into a small but cozy house in the suburbs, a house she bought with the money received from Amadi Sterling. The divorce was finalized quickly. Kwame, being in jail and realizing the hopelessness of his situation, signed all the documents without objection. Adero received her share of the property, though it was little. The main assets had been seized in the criminal case. But the main thing was that she was free from lies, betrayal, and an unhappy marriage. The pregnancy progressed well, but in the 7th month, complications arose. Her doctor insisted on hospitalization. Elias Mbeki took Adero's case under his personal control. He visited her every day, monitored her health, and supported her emotionally. "Doctor, you're giving me too much attention," Adero said. "Surely you have other patients." "I do," Elias smiled, "but none of them evoke these feelings in me." These words sounded like a confession. Adero understood that the doctor felt more than just professional affection for her. "Elias, Adero, I wasn't planning on talking about this. You're going through a tough time right now. You need support, not additional complications. But I can't keep quiet any longer." He sat down beside her bed. "Over these years, you've become a very special person to me. I admire your strength, your kindness, your ability not to give up in the face of difficulties. Elias, I just got divorced. I'm going to have a child with another man. Why would you want such complications?" "Because I love you," he said simply, "and I want to be by your side and by your child's side, if you'll let me." Adero was silent, digesting what she had heard. After Kwame's lies and betrayal, this sincerity was like a breath of fresh air. "I need time to think," she said. "Of course, I'm not rushing you." But she didn't need much time to think. Over the next few days, Elias demonstrated his feelings not with words, but with actions. He was by her side when she felt unwell. He supported her when she doubted herself. He was simply present when she felt alone. "All right," Adero said a week later. "Let's try. But let's take it slowly. I have too many wounds that haven't healed yet." "We will move at whatever pace is comfortable for you," Elias promised. Jamari was born full term, a healthy, strong boy. Elias was present for the birth, supported Adero, and was the first to hold the baby. "He's beautiful," he whispered, looking at the newborn. "A true little warrior." "Thank you," Adero said, looking at the man who had become so dear to her, "for everything. I should be thanking you for letting me be here with you." The first few months after the birth were happy, but not easy. Adero learned to be a mother. Elias helped her with everything. He was not the child's biological father, but he already loved Jamari as his own son. 6 months after the baby's birth, Elias proposed to Adero, modestly, without fanfare or grand words. "I want us to become a real family," he said. "You, me, and Jamari. I'm ready to give him my last name and be his father in every way except biology." Adero accepted without hesitation. She understood she had found the man she had been waiting for all her life without knowing it. The wedding was simple, with only the closest people present. After the wedding, Elias officially adopted Jamari. The boy took the last name Mbeki and became a full member of the new family. 2 years later, their daughter Zia was born. Now, their family was complete and happy. Kwame Barden received 4 years in prison. The first few months in jail were the hardest. He couldn't adjust to the new reality, that he had gone from a successful entrepreneur to an inmate. His cellmates regarded him with suspicion. The white-collar guy from the world of big business inspired distrust, but gradually, Kwame learned to live by prison rules. He thought a lot about the past, analyzing his mistakes. The main one had been putting money and career above love and honesty. For phantom wealth, he had destroyed his own family and life. No letters came from Adero. He didn't even know she had a child. His lawyer only informed him that his wife had filed for divorce and was demanding a division of assets. "What assets?" Kwame laughed bitterly. "Everything is seized or sold off for debts." But what tormented him most was the thought that he never understood who had betrayed him, who had handed over the compromising documents to the investigation, who knew his shady dealings well enough to compile such a compelling file. Sometimes it seemed to him it was someone from the Sterling family, but how could they have gained access to the agency's internal documents? He never got the answer to that question. After 3 years, Kwame was released on parole for good behavior. By then, he had changed a lot, not only externally, but internally. Prison had taught him to value simple human joys and not chase after phantom wealth. Upon his release, Kwame understood that his old life no longer existed. The agency had been liquidated. His reputation was ruined, his connections lost. In his hometown, he had become a pariah. Kwame decided to start over somewhere else. He sold the last few valuables he owned and bought a ticket to a small provincial town 1,000 miles away. There, he found work as a mechanic at the local factory. He had learned the trade in his youth while working his way through college. Now, those skills were serving as his means of survival. The first few months were very difficult. Loneliness, poverty, the realization that his life had gone downhill. But gradually, Kwame began to find solace in simple, honest work. He rented a small room in a communal apartment. He was frugal with everything. He avoided temptation. He didn't drink alcohol. He didn't gamble. He tried to live quietly and discreetly. The locals regarded him with suspicion. A stranger always raises eyebrows in a small town. But Kwame wasn't looking to draw attention. He worked, read books at the library, and took walks in the surrounding area. Sometimes, at night, he wrote letters he never sent, letters to Adero, asking for forgiveness for everything he had done. He told her about his new life, asked how she was doing, but he understood he had no right to intrude on her new life. His chapter in Adero's story was over, and it was better to leave everything as it was. 5 years passed since Kwame's arrest. Adero lived a happy family life with Elias and the children. One spring day, Adero was on a business trip in the city where she and Kwame had once lived. Her business concluded earlier than planned, and she had a few free hours. For some reason, she wanted to visit the places connected with her past. She went to their old apartment and stood by the entrance, remembering 10 years of their life together. Not all those years had been bad. There had been bright moments, sincere feelings, and shared dreams. It was a shame Kwame had chosen the path of lies and betrayal. Returning to her car, Adero saw a familiar figure at the bus stop. Kwame. He too had coincidentally decided to visit the city where they had once been happy. He had changed a lot. He was thinner, older, his hair was graying, but the main thing that had changed was the expression on his face. The self-confidence that used to characterize him was gone. Now he looked tired, but somehow more human. Kwame noticed her too. Their eyes met across the street. For several seconds, they stared at each other without moving. Adero saw surprise, shame, and something akin to regret in his gaze. Kwame took a step forward, as if wanting to approach, but then stopped. A bus arrived. Kwame looked at Adero one last time and boarded the bus. She watched him until the bus disappeared around the corner. Only then did Adero understand that she felt neither anger nor hatred toward her ex-husband. Only sadness for how everything could have been different if he had chosen her over lies and betrayal that one time. The encounter with Adero impacted Kwame deeply. Seeing his ex-wife, he understood who he had lost. She looked happy, well cared for, and loved. Her appearance spoke of a woman who had found her happiness. That night, Kwame didn't sleep. He thought about his once-beloved wife living somewhere, and that he himself had destroyed the only true love of his life. But this encounter was also a turning point. Kwame understood it was time to stop feeling sorry for himself and start building a new life. Not the grand life he had dreamed of before, but a simple, honest life as an ordinary person. A few months later, he met Nia Davis, a local school teacher, a widow with a teenage daughter, Kalia. Nia was a simple, kind woman who wasn't interested in his past and accepted him as he was. Kwame helped Nia with household chores, took care of her daughter, and gradually became part of their small family. "You're a good man," Nia told him. "You've obviously had a difficult life, but you haven't become bitter." Kwame didn't tell her the details of his past, only that he had been an entrepreneur, lost everything due to the economic crisis, and divorced his wife. Nia didn't press for details. She judged people by their actions, not their past. A year later, they married. A quiet ceremony at the local courthouse, no guests or celebrations. Kwame became a stepfather to Nia's daughter, Kalia, and a good husband to her. It was as if he was atoning for his previous sins, giving all his love and care to his new family. And little by little, he regained what he had once lost: inner peace and a sense of rightness in his life. Another 5 years passed. Adero lived in complete harmony with her husband and children. Jamari grew up to be an intelligent and kind boy, very much like his mother. Zia was a lively and cheerful girl, the favorite of the whole family. Elias turned out to be an excellent father. He never differentiated between Jamari and Zia. He loved them with equal intensity. Jamari called him Dad and didn't even know he had another biological father. Adero sometimes thought of Kwame, especially when Jamari did something that reminded her of her ex-husband. But they were fleeting thoughts, without pain or regret. The past had remained in the past. The Sterling family also settled their lives. Nyala married a young doctor, an honest and decent man. They had 2 children. Amadi and Zuri were happy grandparents. Adero had found her happiness. She knew her family was strong precisely because it was built on love and mutual respect, not on coercion or obligation. And somewhere far away, in a small provincial town, Kwame Barden ate dinner with his new family and thought about the path that had led him to this modest but honest happiness. He had paid a high price for his mistakes, but he had learned to value what he had now, and that, too, was justice. Cruel, but deserved. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story, with love and respect.